let's begin. So, everyone can see my screen? Great. All right, so today we'll be talking about Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher. As we've done the past few times, and as we'll be doing in the future, here's our outline. So, introduction, why are we discussing Kant? Biography, how did he live? Historical background, what were the historical circumstances that influenced his life? Philosophy, what did he believe? Philosophical background, how did he come to what he believed? And the critique of pure reason, a famous work by Kant, in which we'll see exactly how Kant argued. All right, so first up, why are we discussing Kant? Immanuel Kant is, according to some, not according to all and not according to Russell, but according to some, the greatest modern philosopher. And even if you don't agree with that, you have to understand why people thought that, because he has this huge impact on how we live, how we think, aesthetics, and political science, although in this course we'll only talk about his impact on how we think and how we live. Aesthetics, by the way, if you don't know, is how we determine what's beautiful. The Germans especially have a whole philosophy of beauty. It's not particularly popular in the in England and America. All right. So in this lecture, our specific focus is how Kant helped save philosophy from Hume's skepticism, which we covered last time, and he does this through a theory of knowledge. And something that's very related to all of us here in Lonely Reader, Kant's the one who comes up with Sapere aude, dare to be wise. He said it should be the official motto of the Enlightenment. So now you know where that's from, and if you didn't know what it meant before, now you know. All right, good stuff. So let's cover Kant's biography. How did Kant live? So Kant was born in 1724 in Königsberg, Prussia, in what is now Russia, to a religious, non-noble, middle-class family. He led a disciplined, rigid life, and to give you guys some examples of that, because it's actually pretty interesting exactly how, well, boring his life was. So Kant, this man here, never married. He had such a regular daily schedule that his neighbors set their clocks by his coming and going. So he'd like pass by someone's house at the same time every day, and he did that so often that his neighbors used to be like, "Oh, it's 10 a.m. Kant just passed by our house." And he spent almost his entire life, with the exception of 4 years, within 10 miles or 16 kilometers of his hometown. So he really never left where he grew up. He never really changed up what he did, except for one rare famous exception, when he reads Rousseau's Emile, which we'll talk about in a little bit, who exactly Rousseau is and why Kant was so shaken up by it. So despite his boring life, or perhaps because of it, he achieved early success in both science and philosophy. So in science, one of his best known works was a work in which he hypothesized the solar system had formed from a spinning cloud of gas, which, as we know, is exactly how the solar system formed today. So that was a pretty good hypothesis by Kant. But then everything changed for Immanuel Kant. In 1771, at age 46, he reads Hume's treatise, and Hume's skepticism so shook him that he went into isolation for 10 years. And he finally emerged in 1781 with his greatest work, The Critique of Pure Reason, which was poorly received at first, as it seems all of our philosophical works are. But luckily for Kant, by the end of the decade, it was actually quite popular. And finally, Kant died in 1804, age 79, in his hometown of Königsberg, Prussia, which of course he never really left. And for those of you who are interested in last words, Kant's last words were "Es ist gut." John, what do you think of my pronunciation?
Es ist gut.
Yeah, which means it is good. So that was, I guess, supposedly how Kant summed up his entire life, although I guess he could have also been talking about whatever was around him at the time. But, so that's Kant's life in a nutshell. It's not the most exciting life of the philosophers we read, so I don't think there's too much more to be said about it. So, biography. His life was boring. He was boring. Important philosopher, but not much to be said for, I don't know, like to make a movie about his life wouldn't be a great idea. So, historical background, Kant's life. By the way, everyone, I don't think it was too complicated, but everyone understands Kant's life, Kant's biography. All right. Cool. Yeah, I didn't think it was too difficult to understand. So, in terms of historical background, what influenced Kant's life? How did he end up living the life he lived? Well, his life was boring because the immediate area in which he lived was pretty boring. So between 1724 and 1804, we have the French Revolution, we have the American Revolution. So this is the French Revolution here, you know, cannon fire and guillotines and whatever. Nothing really happens in Prussia during this time. So let's cover exactly what was going on with Prussia, why nothing happens, and what's next in store. Because those of you with who know something about, well, history in general should know Prussia in the 19th century, after Kant dies, becomes exciting, and then Prussia, of course, becomes like the most powerful state in Germany, and in the 20th century, Germany becomes really, really exciting. So let's figure out why exactly Prussia gets from very boring to very interesting very fast. All right. So, what was Prussia? Well, Prussia is a weird case. So Prussia is a state within the Holy Roman Empire, and we've covered the Holy Roman Empire before. You know, it's this conglomeration of various kingdoms and whatever that we're all constantly backstabbing each other. So it was a state, so it couldn't be a kingdom, technically. So the ruler of Prussia, Frederick II, crowns himself instead king in Prussia. So instead of king of Prussia, he's king in Prussia, which for all practical purposes is pretty much the same thing. This is in 1701. A little while after, Swedish power collapses, and as you guys should recall, Sweden was during this time going around and invading everyone around them. So their power collapses in 1721, and then Prussia takes advantage of this. They gain territory, they consolidate their hold on their existing territory, and the king organizes Prussia into a modern state by incorporating the Prussian aristocracy, the Junkers. And the way he does this is he makes all the aristocracy, all the Junkers, officers in the army. And this makes Prussia become a very warlike state. Somewhat, you could almost think of it as Sparta, that same idea of the military elite and the aristocratic elite are one and the same. So during Kant's lifetime in 1740, Prussian King Frederick II presses his luck by invading Austria, which worked briefly, but really annoys the rest of Europe, who don't really like people invading other people in the first place, but especially Prussia, who no one takes seriously and no one knows who they are or why they're doing this. So by 1757, Prussia has managed to annoy Austria, Russia, France, and Sweden simultaneously. So they were in a land war with all of them at the same time. All was almost lost, but luckily during this time, Russia's empress died. Russia sort of loses its appetite for fighting, and Prussia isn't completely overrun. So they learned from this experience not to get involved with in land wars with all of Europe or a lot of Europe at the same time, which lasts until World War I, at which point they get in a land war with most of Europe at the same time. And then World War II, they do the same thing again. So I guess we'll see when the next time that Prussia/Germany gets in a land war with most of Europe, because they do seem to like doing that. So after having a fun time, again fighting everyone, throughout the rest of the 18th century, Prussia still Prussia is still a military aristocracy, so they're still very warlike, and they slowly take over Poland. And then by 1795, Poland was split between Austria, Prussia, and Russia, which sort of is generally pretty accurate for Polish history, because after 1600, Poland has probably the worst time of any country in Europe. They're just repeatedly overrun and annexed by stronger powers, especially like Russia and Prussia, or later on Germany. So yeah, there's interesting history behind why Poland is so attacked all the time, but we don't have time to go into that right now. So when Kant died, so 1804, Prussia was in the process of what would begin as a fruitful alliance between themselves and Napoleon, and end disastrously once Napoleon took over a large part of Prussia. So it started off as a really good idea to ally yourself with a very aggressive person who takes over other countries, and then backfired once he took over a large part of their country. So as a side note, Napoleon also eventually loses once he gets in a war with, again, most of Europe. And it seems strange that, first of all, everyone keeps trying this, getting in a war with most of Europe, and it keeps going poorly for whoever does it. And it also seems amazing that no one's done that since the end of World War II, because it seemed like such a popular pastime before that. So I guess we'll see who the next country will be to get in a land war with most of Europe. All right, and by the way, so these are the Prussian Junkers. this is a photograph, so of course it's from much, much later. This is end of the 19th century. But still, you get the basic idea. Famous pointy hats. Their normal uniform is essentially just a military uniform, all carrying their swords. So yeah, it was, Prussia was a very interesting place. It really was sort of a modern day Sparta in a lot of ways. All right. I know I went through that very quickly. Are there any questions before I go on? Because I did go through that rather quickly. It's not big deal, but all right. If everything's clear, need a brief translation. All right, I'll have John do a quick translation.
好，就是说康德的出生背景，他是出生在东普鲁士的格尼斯堡镇，不是镇啊，格尼斯堡市。那其实东普鲁士呢，当时并不是一个很落后的地方，它是普鲁士的领土的一部分，而格尼斯堡呢，这是东普鲁士的首府。那普鲁士今天已经因为二战的原因，就是现在尤其是格尼斯堡现在是俄国的领土，但是我们可以想象，在康德时代的普鲁士人，因为经过士兵王弗莱德里希和弗莱德里希二世，也就是弗莱德里希大帝的统治，他已经发展成一个士兵国家，或者说是一个国家带着一点行政，一个军队，有人形容这是一个军队带着一点行政的能力。那在这种情况下呢，普鲁士呢，他经历了几场战争，尤其重要的是，对法和对奥的战争，在这几场战争获胜了以后，然后普鲁士才算是在东方站稳了脚跟。那康德呢，这个时候就出生在这样子的一个所谓的一个普鲁士的领地。我们知道，当时的普鲁士并不是整个德国，而是德国的众联邦，或者说神圣罗马帝国的众联邦中的一个联邦而已。这是一个比较简要的历史背景。然后，有问题吗？现在？或者说清楚了吗？
All right. So basic outline here. Kant lived as Prussia starts to get wealthier, more powerful, more aggressive, but it's not at the height of its power yet. So let's go on to philosophy. So what did Kant believe? So Kant's philosophy is probably the hardest out of everyone we've covered so far. Just try to keep track of the terminology. Remember, it's a direct response to Hume's attack on induction and should make sense. I'll also be pausing a lot, so to give time for John to translate, because it is important that you guys understand exactly what Kant is saying and where he's coming from. So, for Kant, there's two distinctions that must be made about all knowledge. Analytic versus synthetic, and a priori versus empirical. So all knowledge is divided into basically two categories. So it's either analytic or it's synthetic, and it's either a priori or empirical. So analytic knowledge, first category, is knowledge by definition. Synthetic knowledge is everything else. So analytic knowledge, you look at this book cover and you say, Barack Obama's last name is Obama, because that's the definition of a name, right? As long as you know this is his name, Barack Obama, the definition of a name is the second part, it's the last name, so Obama. Synthetic knowledge would be knowing this guy is the current president of the United States, because you know that from experience, someone telling you, something like that. So, a priori knowledge is knowledge that does not rely on experience. Empirical knowledge is knowledge that relies on experience. This is related to the definition above, but it's not the same. So the reason why it's related to the same definition above is because you could use the same example here. You don't have to watch the news to know that his last name is Obama. As soon as you look at this book cover, you know his last name is Obama. You do have to watch the news to know he's president. However, the reason why it's not the same as this distinction above is that Kant says the equation 2 plus 2 equals 4 does not rely on experience, but it's not knowledge by definition. So math is something different. You wouldn't know 2 plus 2 equals 4 the first time you did math. You'd have to count it out. You'd have to do addition. But you wouldn't have to actually experience 2 objects and 2 objects becoming 4 objects to know it. You can't figure it out by definition, but you don't need experience to know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. So Kant rescues knowledge from Hume by claiming that the law of causality is synthetic but a priori. So it's not by definition, but you don't need experience. Remember, Hume says law of causality just can't be proven. We can never say something causes something else for sure. So this is the most important claim that Kant makes, that it's synthetic but a priori. So our next step is going to be figuring out exactly what Kant is talking about here and how he defends this idea. Before we do that, though, I'll let John help me translate Kant's philosophy.
OK， 我想大家如果现在手上有一支笔的话，最好能不能画下一个2乘以2的矩阵，因为这里牵涉到2个维度，2个很重要的概念区别。在一个维度上，有这样子2个对立的2种命题，一种叫综合的命题，一种叫分析的命题。所谓分析的命题呢，就是魏相说出了主项里，魏相没有多说主项里有任何，sorry， 就是魏相并没有给主项扩展任何信息量，比如说 Barack Obama 的姓是奥巴马，因为你所做的声称已经包含在他的主语里，或者一个橘子的皮的颜色是黄色的，那橘子的皮的颜色当然是黄色，它没有增加任何信息量的这样子的一个命题是分析的命题。但是如果说奥巴马是美国总统这样的命题呢，那这个命题就是综合的命题，因为在你听说他是总统之前，你并不知道他是总统。奥巴马这个概念被总统这个概念扩展了，在这种情况下，这样子的命题是一个综合命题，这是维度 A。那维度 B 上呢，刚才区分了有2种情况，一种叫先天的，一种叫后天的，或者说经验的。所谓先天的命题呢，就是经验之外的命题，然后经验的命题呢，就是你一定要听到什么，感觉到什么，见到什么，你才会知道的东西。然后呢，在这2个维度的交错之下，我们发现有4种情况的命题，就是先天经验，就是先天综合、先天分析、后天综合和后天分析4种命题。那康德说呢，其他都很简单，但是我们要注意的是，在先天综合的这一栏上，很奇怪，有一些命题它是先天的，就是它是非经验的，但它却是综合的，就是它是带来新的信息量的。比如说数学题，比如说2+3等于5，这个命题它并不依赖于经验，所以它是先天的。但是呢， 2+3等于5，它确实是一个信息的演算，它确实是一个信息的拓展，它带给人新的知识，某种意义上，所以它是一个综合命题。所以这是和前面的哲学家很不一样，就是康德提出了在先天综合的交错的地方有这样一些命题，是所谓的先天综合命题。我知道这里可能很不清楚，但是我想大家继续往下听，可能会稍微明白一些。
All right, good stuff. Kant's difficult, so it's good that you guys are understanding so far. So the next step here is organizing knowledge. So now that we have, synthetic versus analytic, a priori versus empirical. So let's talk about how we organize knowledge. So although we get knowledge from the outside world, we organize it intuitively by our mental processes. It's not something you do actively. You can't know anything about the outside world or how your mental picture corresponds to it, but you do know how yourself organizes it. The intuitive way we organize is with space and time. So for instance, if you see rocks on a fire, the rocks and the fire and the wood give you your knowledge, but your internal processes are what tells you that the spatial relationship. So it tells you the rocks are on the fire. If you didn't have these internal processes, if your brain didn't automatically do this for you, you'd never be able to know that the rocks were on the fire. You wouldn't be able to make sense of this whole picture. So once we have our intuitive understanding, this automatic thing that comes to us, we can apply to it this conscious high-level understanding, which come in the form of a priori concepts. So concepts that don't come from experience. Causality is an a priori concept, and the rest come from Aristotle's syllogisms. So you see the rocks on the fire. You don't get a choice about whether or not you see this. Your brain automatically organizes this for you. Rocks on a fire. Now, you can consciously think, based on these concepts that you're born with, that the fire makes the rocks become hot. Right? So that's causality. The rocks are hot because of the fire. All right. So, given that these space and time are intuitive understandings, that we don't get a choice, they're just, before we even know it, our brain has applied it to whatever we see. It's nonsense to try to apply these intuitive understandings of space and time to things which you cannot experience. So these only apply to things you've experienced. So when you try to do that, you come up with antinomies, which are mutually contradictory statements, but both seem to be true. So Kant comes up with 4 antinomies, which are these nonsense statements that come when you try to imply your intuitive understandings to things which you cannot experience. So the first, the world has a beginning and is limited, versus the world has no beginning and is infinite. You've tried to understand, apply your understanding of time to the world, the beginning of the world, something you can't experience, and so you've ended up with 2 statements that both seem to be true, but can't both be true. So the world has a beginning and is limited, versus the world has no beginning and is infinite. The second antinomy, a substance is made up of parts. So anything like anything's made up of atoms, versus a substance is not made up parts versus something is whole and not the only way to understand a table, for instance, is as a whole table. You can't understand it as its atoms. There is both nature's law and free will versus there is only free will. So things are determined, but there's also free will. Or you can say there's only free will. And finally, there's an absolutely necessary being, a prime mover, versus there's not. So what's interesting, what you'll notice a lot of these, is these are problems that really troubled thinkers like Aristotle and Aquinas, right? They argued a ton about, for instance, the world has no beginning and it's infinite. They argued a ton about a substance made up of parts. They argued about free will. They argued about prime mover. And you know what part Aquinas was on for all of these. You know, Aquinas was for prime mover, for free will. He didn't take a strong stance on this one, and he took a strong stance on the world has beginning. So Kant, on the other hand, says these aren't philosophical problems. These are psychological problems. These are just, the reason why you're so puzzled by these is because you're trying to apply your intuitive understandings of space and time to things which you can't experience. That's the reason why you're so puzzled, not because this is good philosophy. All right. So I know that's pretty tough. So I'll hand it over to John to translate.
所以我们刚才说，就是在人类的知识空间中，有一类知识叫做先天综合知识、先天综合命题或者先天综合知识。那为了揭示这个知识到底是什么样一个知识，在我们的整个思维的体系里呢，康德开始重构我们认知的过程。然后呢，与之前的哲学家不同，康德非常强烈的认为，人的认知的过程并不是一蹴而就的，它是分成了好几个阶段。首先呢，我们用时空的形式，就是时间和空间的形式去组织这个世界。就是说，当我们看到这个世界的物体，看到这些色彩啊或者形状没有形状，看到这些色彩、这些光、这些颜色、这些刺激的时候呢，我们的脑海里先是试图着用时间和空间的框架把它们组织起来，然后呢，在它们组织起来变成一个一个的实在物体之后呢，我们又试图着用一些范畴，就是比如说它们是不是相等的，它们是不是同一个东西，或者它们是不是有因果关系这样的范畴，把我们刚才用时空形式编织起来的物体在也做各种各样的连接，然后这种编织和连接的过程，在康德看来是一个非常重要的一个现象，它揭示了我们的所谓的先天综合的努力或者先天综合的动作是在哪里完成的。这是这一页非常重要的内容。然后呢，就是关于我们说的刚才提到的先天综合的努力到最终知识的产生，这两个过程其实关乎的是两个非常不同的领域。然后我们经常在处理这两个不同领域的时候，我们混淆了，并且我们把我们的很多知识的范畴和知识的时空形式用到了一些不太适合的地方。比如说康德会说我们一直被一个恶律背反，比如说是自由意志和被自由意志和机械论决定这个事件这样子两种不同的世界观困扰，或者两种东西都是对的。那康德会说，其实呢，我们对这个世界的因果性或者对世界的机械论有这么强的信赖，是因为我们把一些时空的范畴，应用到了这个世界上，而这个世界似乎是不能被这些范畴穷尽的。那我们作为一个行动的人，是能够完全有能力进行自由的行动的。只有当我们把人或者说把我们的时空范畴 应用到人本身，这个并不适用于应用时空范畴的地方，我们才会把人编织到一个因果关系的网里。那这其实是一个我们所有的二律背反其实都是这样子一个错位的使用我们的时空范畴以及时空形式以及先天范畴的这样子的一个行为的结果。唉，我知道这里还是很不清楚，但是我想听听你们的问题。Okay, so yeah, why the application of the time-space form is the effort is a synthetic or a priori effort.
So why is that a priori?
Why is the application of space and time into the material world an effort of like an a priori synthetic effort?
Good question. So like essentially space and time are like these tools we're given to understand the world, right? So it's not so much a synthetic effort. It's that the effort we get from it is synthetic. It's like when you use it's like a saw. If you use a saw to saw wood, at the end of it you'll get sawed wood, which is exactly what you want. If you're confused about what a saw is for, on the other hand, and you try to use it to hammer in a nail, you're probably just going to end up scuffing up the nail a lot, and you won't accomplish what you think you're going to accomplish. So I think that's how Kant wants us to think about space and time, and these tools that we're given to understand the world around us.
So, 我的理解就是，为什么说结合着时空形式的先天范畴，就是当我们把这些范畴用来刻画世界、用来理解世界的时候，为什么它是先天综合的呢？首先它是综合的，因为它在这种划分或者在这种组织这种原初的感官材料的时候，我们为这个世界增加了新的知识，我们也为自己增加了新的知识。只要是带来新的知识的命题，当然就是综合命题。它为什么是先天的呢？这很麻烦，因为我们刚才已经说了，先天的其实并不是非经验的，而是也可能是前经验的，就是在我们组织这个世界的过程中，这部分贡献的知识或者努力，是我们往这个世界上投射出去的那些框架、那些模型、那些雕刻这个世界或者理解这个世界的努力，在我们这一方，其实我们还没有动用到经验的资源，所以在这个意义上，我觉得是先天的，就是它并不是非经验，而是前经验或者说高于经验或者是组织经验的东西，在这个意义上，它是所谓的先天的努力。不知道这样子会不会让大家清楚一些
？Right. Okay, can you do a quick translation of what prime mover is? I think they're just asking what prime mover means.
Prime mover, yeah, 这是我们之前在 Aquinas 的课上谈到的一个很重要的一个上帝存在的证明。为什么会有第一移动者，或者有没有第一移动者？那在康德的时代，对于他来说，理论上应该是有第一移动者，要不然这世界上的东西不能开始移动。但是呢，这个世界仿佛又是一个无穷的因果链的一个无限的延伸，所以又很可能没有第一移动者。所以对于康德来说，有没有第一移动者，也很可能成为当然这是一个很好的理由，成为一个二律背反。对。
All right. So we've also got a question from Sophie. From sensation to perception by time and space, time and space belong to intuitive that cause puzzle when we understand antinomies. Can't include 4. That's right. I think you've got the right idea. Yeah, yeah. So we understand the world around us by time and space. So yeah. So when we try to use these tools for something else, we get confused, and we don't even realize we're getting confused. And it's not so much that a priori has to be blindly believed. It's more you don't get a choice in the matter. And we'll actually go into Kant talks a lot about this. So we'll talk about it more in a second. But you don't get a choice in the matter. It's not like you believe that there's space. Kant says you literally cannot think of something without the concept of space. You can't, looking at this picture, you can't imagine this picture without the concept of space. It's just literally not something your brain is equipped for.
So, 关于中文的问题，然后这边有问就是前与经验，对不起，我可能刚才没有说的太清楚。前和先是一样的，它的术语是 a priori，就是从之前而来的一些东西。所谓经验，并不是前人得出的经验，甚至不是在时间上前于感官经验的一些知识，而是说，它的组织，它会某种意义上是从人作为认知主体投射而出，或者说用来框架这个世界，它在很短的时间，如果你希望理解的话，在心理学的意义上，在很短的时间或许早于最终的知识，但是其实很短的时间，就是我们对知识组装、切割、打工、包装，打磨、包装这样子的一个过程，它是前经验的，然后是在这个意义上是前，所以前和先并没有差别。
Yeah. Other questions? Anything?
Yeah, priori need to be blindly believed. I think so. 因为
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So then, yeah, I think we're good for right now. We have more to go. Kant said a lot of things. So hopefully you guys will understand it a little better. Right. So every sensation has a cause in the world, but is organized by us according to our mental processes. The purest forms of these mental processes are space and time, which are the same intuitions that every human has. So this is a guy looking at this rock wall in a quarry, and I guess he's decided that this is maybe 1 meter, 1.5 meter. He only knows this because of his mental perceptions. His like, some sensation has caused the idea in his head that the rock is 1.5 meter tall here. Now, the thing is, every human in this guy's place would also see this rock as 1.5 meter tall. So the sensations are caused by the rock actually being here. They're organized into a sense of space. So this guy's head says, okay, this is 1.5 meters tall. And every human in his place would also see the rock as 1.5 meters tall. Now, Kant claims that understandings of space and time aren't gained from experience, but we just have them from the beginning. They're not empirical, but a priori. He has 4 arguments to prove this. They're mostly about space, and Kant thought that time was obvious if you agreed with his argument about space. And by the way, I've also included Russell's arguments. Sort of in the same way, Maimonides was packaged with a rabbi who disagreed with him. I've packaged Kant with Russell's arguments against the idea that space and time are a priori, that we have them from the beginning rather than getting them from experience. So, first, You can't have outer experiences to understand space from, because you can't have the concept of outer experiences without the concept of space. So remember, Kant is trying to use this to say space and time are not something we understand from experience. They're something we're born with, that just comes with us. So in terms of Russell's disagreements, so first of all, if space is just intuitive and has no relation to the real world, why does every human being see this gap as 1.5 meters? Doesn't this imply that there's some cause in the real world of every human being seeing this gap as 1.5 meters? And the same problem applies to time. If time is just intuitive, then why does everyone see time in the same way? What caused it to all be the same with everyone? Why does everyone see one thing happening after the other? Next problem, do you really need outer experiences to understand space? So do you really need the idea that this is myself and this is the world around me? Don't you really just need the idea that different things are in different places? My body's here, this ruler is here, this rock wall is here, rather than the idea that different things are outside this body we call ourself? So that's Russell's first problem. He disagrees with the idea of outer experiences. And he also says, to start off with, I really think that you need to explain why everyone sees this gap as 1.5 meters, why every human sees this gap as 1.5 meters. So that's Russell's argument for the first argument. Second of Kant's argument. Kant says you can't imagine no space, but you can imagine nothing but space. So Kant says you know that space is an a priori notion because you can't imagine there being no space in between this guy and the rock wall, like him and the rock wall being one and the same, him, the ruler, the rock wall. You can't imagine there being no space, but you can imagine there being nothing but space. So there's just no objects there, everything is just space. Russell's argument is quite simply says, I don't think that's true. He says, I can't imagine nothing but space any more than I can imagine no space. That to me is inconceivable. So Kant's third argument, though, for why space and time are a priori, not empirical, is he says space is not an expression of relations, but an intuition, because there's only one space, and spaces are really parts of space. Things are not related by space, but in space. So he says, you're not really saying that this is 1.5 meters tall, or this guy is 2 meters away from the rock wall. You're not really expressing relations. You're really just seeing all of this as one space. And here, above, behind, to the right, to the left. You're seeing all of this as one space. So he says, it's not like an understanding that you get from relations. It's this intuitive concept of space as a whole thing. And then you just say, okay, well, there's a guy in space, and there's a ruler in space, and there's a rock wall in space. So Russell's disagreement with this is quite simple. Again, Russell just says, that's not how I understand space. I understand this guy as being 2 meters away, this is being 1.5 meters away from this. Everything's related by space. He says, I don't understand everything as being in space. So Kant's final argument, parts of space are not instances of space. but are within all of space. So this is different from, say, a cat, which is an instance of the concept cat. Therefore, space is not a concept, but an intuition. So he says, this guy is an instance of the concept man. So you look at this and you see a man of the general category man. You look at this and you see a ruler of the general concept of ruler. But he says you look at this space in here and you don't see an example of space of the general category of space. So therefore, you know space isn't a concept. You understand the concept of man through experience, the category of man through experience. You understand the category of ruler through experience. You don't understand the category of space through space, because there's no such thing as the category of space. All right. So even though we haven't finished with this section yet, I know that's a lot to go over. So I'm going to have John translate what we've done so far before we go on to the next bit.
其实大家不要太被困扰在这里了，因为康德在这里做出了一个非常艰难的一个区分，就是我们刚才提到，康德在谈到我们的先天综合的努力，对知识先天综合的努力的时候，看似有2个步骤，第一是用时空的形式加在这个世界上，然后第2步我们是用范畴或者是概念投射在这个世界上。那康德这里要论证的呢，就是我们这2步东西不是一步东西，也就是说，时空不是范畴，或者不是概念。概念是什么呢？概念就是，比如说，当我得出眼前的这台电脑，它是一台电脑，这是一个概念；或者，这里有一杯水，然后洒到电脑上，然后这杯水，电脑坏了，它们是因果关系，这是一个概念或者是一个范畴。然后呢，对于康德来说，他这里在论证，我们看下一页。他在论证时空并不是范畴的过程中，他用了几个非常艰难或者是非常晦涩的争论。就是首先呢，他说我们不会有外部经验，如果说我们连空间的概念都没有，所以说呢，是我们一定要先有空间的概念，我们才会有里外之别，然后我们才会有诸如我自己这样子的概念。也就是说，时间也就是说空间呢，一定是早于概念而存在，或者说有别于概念而存在的。然后呢，再比如说呢，你可以关于概念的东西，你可以想象概念有，也可以想象概念没有。比如说，你可以想象这个杯子有，它如果是你的一个概念，你也可以想象这个概念现在不存在。但是关于时空呢，对于康德来说，我知道对于大家很难接受。他说我们无法想象时空都不见了的情况，所以它不是一个可来可去的一个东西，所以这个东西不会是概念。比如这样，所以康德在这里的论证很简单，时间和空间。它是理解这个理解有一切东西的形式，但它还不是概念本身，这是2步的东西，或者说这是2个不同范畴的，或者说不同领域的解决或者是理解这个世界的工具，时空和概念不一样。大家清楚了吗？或者说，对，确实很难清楚，但是如果有问题的话。
All right. Oh.
Oh yeah.
So time we'll get to in a second. Any of the Chinese comments we should cover?
I go there right here.
Yeah.
OK. 时空是不可认知的。某种意义上是你说的是对，某种意义上不对的。康德会说，时空它并不是认知的对象，而是在我们认知别的东西的时候，已经融入这个东西，或者说我们已经投射在这个认知里面的。它是前于经验的一个认知这个世界的工具，它并不是被认知的东西。所以这是对你问题的一个回应吗？
All right. So let's go on. So finish this out. So Euclidean geometry, according to Kant, is also a priori but synthetic. So again, we understand it without experience, but we don't understand it by definition. We have to figure it out, but once we do, we understand it through an intuitive concept of space. So, Kant says you don't need any experience to understand this. You do need to work hard, and you need to do the math to understand this, but you don't need any experience to. You should be able to understand it by just what comes with you when you're born. So Russell's objection to this is some geometry is deducible by pure logic, so it's not synthetic. So if you can deduce it by deductive logic, then not only is it a priori, but it's analytic, because deductive logic relies on definitions, right? So if it's analytic, it's deductive, and some geometry is deductive. Other geometry was only figured out in the 19th century, after Kant, and it was figured out through presumably experience, so we have to assume it wasn't a priori. If all these smart people in Kant's time, thinking a lot about geometry, weren't able to figure out non-Euclidean geometry, which is sort of a broad category, difficult concepts. But if all these people weren't able to figure out this one part of geometry, it suggests that they lacked the experience to. So that's another part of Kant and another Russell's objection. Second part is Russell is also bothered by the idea of space and time being subjective, so depending entirely on the observer. So he says it's possible to imagine space being subjective, but it would seem to be an intuition just as color. We intuitively understand the red rock is 1 meter away, even if someone else intuitively sees it as a blue rock 2 meters away from you. So for instance, Russell says, I can imagine this being subjective, that the distance from this guy to this ruler being subjective when he looks at it. But he doesn't understand the difference between, say, this guy seeing this ruler as red and this guy seeing this ruler as 10 meters away from him. Both of these are these intuitions that, according to us, seem wrong or seem weird, because it seems yellow and it seems maybe like a meter, half a meter away from him, maybe even less than that. Probably, I'm not very good with the metric system. So, but it's quite close to him. It's definitely not 10 meters away, and this ruler is definitely not red. So Russell says, what's the difference? What's the difference between saying this ruler is 10 meters away, saying this ruler is red? On the other hand, Russell says, I think time is totally different from space. He says, I can't imagine a ball flying before it's thrown. One thing happening before the other. It doesn't seem like it'd be the same thing here with seeing this ruler as 10 meters away or seeing it as red. He says, seeing a ball as flying before it's thrown it is just literally impossible. You can't imagine it, and you can't imagine someone else thinking it. So that's according to Russell. According to me, if I can sort of insert myself in this disagreement between two great philosophers, it doesn't seem impossible to me. So like if you guys have ever watched a really close horse race, you might imagine one horse finishing before the other, and then you see it in slow motion and you see the other horse finishing before the other, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay. So you realize your understanding of time was actually wrong before. You know, the first time you saw this horse crossing this line first, but then once you saw it in slow motion, you see this horse crossing first. And you're like, okay, now I understand. And your subjective understanding of time is now different. Also, on a side note, to all of this, we now know with the wonders of modern science, it's possible to see and not intuitively understand space. So it's hard to say what Kant would have said about that, but people who are blind since birth and are suddenly given sight actually have a very hard time of understanding space and understanding how far things are away from them, and a lot of things that we take for granted. So that would probably actually more support Russell's idea, that it's the same idea of someone with color blindness or a mental disorder or something, seeing a red rock as blue or seeing a yellow ruler as red. In the same way, people who are blind since birth have a very hard time with distances and space. So yeah, so this is some heavy stuff. I know, John, you want to translate this?
Yeah, 就是这里提到罗素对康德的几点反对。第一呢，我们刚才说就是康德在他的先天综合的知识领域有一个非常重要的例子，就是数学和几何的命题。我们已经说过，当我们进行数学和几何演算的时候，我们是完全不需要我们的经验，完全不需要知道颜色、知道质量、知道这个东西有多亮，然后我们可以充分的利用理性在我们脑袋里面进行这样子的推演，数学和几何推演，所以它一定是先天的。那它为什么是综合的？对于康德来说，因为它产生了新的知识，它提供了之前或者说我们在假设或者前设中得到了，我们在结果中得到了前设中所没有的知识。在这个意义上，康德认为它是综合的。但罗素辩解说呢，其实这整个过程，尤其在数学和几何中的过程，它都是一个推导的过程。实际上呢，结果并没有蕴含着比前设更多的信息量，所以它不再是综合的命题。这是罗素的第一个批评。当然，其实这个批评也很不成功。那第二个批评呢，是罗素对于康德的就是时空形式是主观的一个批评。就是对于罗素来说，我们的时空当然是可以测量的。A 杯子到 B 杯子是1米，对于路人甲来说它是1米，对于路人乙来说也是1米。就说它一定是一个客观的，是一个可以控制的客观的东西。既然是可以控制的东西，它就不可能是那么的主观，不可能完完全全是人投射。当然，大家也可以同时为康德辩解说，康德说时空形式是人对这个世界的投射，但并没有说这个时空形式是一个非常主观、非常随意的投射。所以这是这两位哲学家在争论的两个重要的议题。大家清楚了吗？
So by the way, in terms of the theory of relativity, so yeah, a lot of people have talked about connections between Kant and Einstein. I think Einstein said that he never read Kant, but certainly many people have talked about Kant's ideas and Einstein's ideas. It's pretty interesting stuff. All right, so we're almost done with Kant's philosophy, and then we can take a 5-minute break, which I think you guys probably need. I do too. So other bits of Kant's philosophy, he has a great takedown of Aquinas' proofs of God, proving that God cannot be proved by reason. So for all of you who hated the Quinque Dei, and hated what Aquinas had to say, you can read Kant and read Kant proving him wrong. In Kant's political science, Kant comes to the conclusion that the best government would be monarchy with mixed democracy, a lot like how England handled it throughout the world, and he said that would guarantee world peace. And then finally, in his ethics, he called for a reasoned approach to moral sentiment. So reason to moral sentiment. Interesting. What exactly does that mean? Well, you'll just have to wait and find out, because we'll be covering it in a couple weeks. All right. So finally, conclusion of his philosophy. To very much simplify it, Kant believed that we have inbuilt structures in our mind, intuitive ideas to help us make sense of the world, specifically space and time. All right, cool. So it is 10:11. Let's take a 5-minute break. I will see you back here at 10:16, and then we'll go over everything else. All right, good stuff. See you in 5 minutes. All right. So, any questions before we start up again? Anything we can cover, explain? While I eat my frosted mini wheats. Everyone good? Everyone okay? Start again? All right. So, I'm not sure we can cover all of this in the time we have left, but we will make a valiant attempt. So, let's go into the background of Kant's philosophy. So, essentially, background to Kant's philosophy, he was trained in Wolff's translation of Leibniz's philosophy, was awakened from his dogmatic slumber by Hume. So dogmatic, what he believed, the things he believed without questioning them. So he says, I was basically sleeping in my beliefs and Hume woke me up. Here we have Christian Wolff. So let's talk a little bit about Leibniz. So Leibniz is best known today as the co-inventor of the calculus, as well as of the notation that we use today, dy dx, or whatever variables you're using. This notation was Leibniz. He was also a philosopher of great renown during the 17th and early 18th centuries. Later on, people tended to make fun of his philosophy a lot, which was a little unfortunate because it's actually, some of it's quite good. Some of it can definitely be made fun of. If you guys ever read Candide by Voltaire, he makes fun of Leibniz's philosophy of the best possible worlds, which Leibniz has a complicated meaning for, but Voltaire takes it at face value and just says, like, has a horrible thing happen to a guy, and then be like, well, this is the best thing that could have happened to me. But for us, the most important part of Leibniz's theory is monads, which are the elements that make up the universe. So this is a pretty strange idea by Leibniz, so you're going to have to just bear with me. So monads are like atoms, except instead of giving parts of the universe substance, they give parts of the universe instructions on what to do. And then to add on to this, it gets very strange. They're mirrors of each other and God can see all of them. So instead of saying that atoms are what makes this up, what causes ice to melt, it's monad. So there's this very weird consequence to all this, that nothing in the universe actually causes anything else. Nothing interacts with anything else. Just instructions coincide. It's not that heat causes ice to melt, it's that ice is being told to melt by its monad, and the fire is being told to burn by its monad. So instructions are coinciding, but one's not causing the other. So it's an interesting approach. It solves Descartes' mind-body problem. Because like monads, you have souls, and so you don't have the problem with the distinction between the mind and the body. You can just say everything is really interacting the same way. But but it's strange because like it really doesn't have much relation to the world we know. And there's so many assumptions that it's hard to know what to do with all of them. Um, so Leibniz as a philosopher, this is a strange idea. And actually, computer scientists much later on quite like it. It's a strange idea. We'll see in a second exactly the impact it has on Kant. So, believe it or not, this was a very popular philosophy back in 17th and early 18th centuries. So, meanwhile, Hume's impact on Kant is obvious. So Kant was a scientist and a philosopher, and Hume's attack on both is devastating. To illustrate this, this is a beaker in a lab which has been broken. Hume's attack on science. So where does Kant get his ideas from? So he accepts Hume's critique of induction as unable to be proven. So he says, okay, you're right. I can't ever prove something causes something else. He denies Hume's belief that all ideas come from impressions, which are mostly caused by sensations, right? Or to put it in the terms we were using before, weak ideas come from strong ideas, which come mostly from things we feel, see, hear, whatever. So he doesn't like this idea of directly translating from what we see to what we think. At the same time, he's not confident, like Leibniz was, that we can just use our intuitions and logic to provide knowledge about the universe. Because Leibniz, this really smart guy who invents calculus, uses his intuition and logic to come up with this, frankly, very weird idea of monads. So Kant acknowledges Leibniz's intuitions and logical thinking. He says, okay, I get that you have certain thoughts about the world and that you think you can understand the world through logic. But he says, I also think that you're right, like Hume is right, that we can't actually prove any of our this causes this. So Kant comes up with this way of humans experiencing the world which takes into account intuitions and thinking, but doesn't bear a necessary relation to the real world. So he says, yes, people do think they can understand the world, and they come up with these natural ways of understanding the world, but they're not necessarily understanding the world. All right, John, you want to do quick translation?
所以对于康德影响，哲学影响的很重要，当然是两个他的先行者，当然除了他的老师 Christian Wolff 以外，还有莱布尼兹。莱布尼兹很出名的一个17世纪的哲学家，法文写作，和牛顿同时发明了微积分。他最重要的理论，对于康德来说，当然是他的单子论，一个非常奇怪的偶因论，他并不太承认。因果关系，相反的，他觉得所有的事情都，这个世界上的事情都蕴含在每一个单子里，然后一切的一切都是单子自己知道自己应该怎么做。我们跳到休谟，休谟很重要的对康德的哲学和科学两个方面都有重大的打击。当然不是直接，因为休谟比康德早了2代人。但是休谟对于哲学和科学的重要打击，可能大家上节课已经学到了。How could I come back? Okay. So, 我们上节课已经学到了，就是休谟尤其攻击了我们脑袋中的观念。他说我们所想的和我们所见到的东西不太一样。我们见到的，比如说2个球互相撞击，但我们想到的是其中的因果关系。这个因果关系呢，完全不是经验得来的，它是值得怀疑的一些东西。那康德呢，确实认为休谟指出的这个很值得怀疑的东西，比如说这2个球之间的关系，可能是我们脑补进去的，它确实可能不太可靠。康德完全承认休谟的怀疑，并且康德要去主动的面对这个挑战。 都清楚了吗？
All right, good stuff. So, in terms of philosophical background, Kant was influenced by the skepticism of Hume and the thorough logic of Leibniz. So, as the last section, critique of pure reason, the question we're asking, how did Kant argue? So, this is a tough book. We're not going to be able to get through everything that I wanted to get through, but that's okay. As long as we can get a good idea of how Kant argued, I'll be happy. So the Critique of Pure Reason was first published in 1781, as you guys already know. So what's it about? Well, in terms of Kant, I do not mean by the title a critique of books and systems, but of the faculty of reason in general, in respect of all knowledge, and after which it may strive independently of all experience. So he's critiquing reason itself, right? So the section we'll be reading is the discipline of pure reason, which is where we prevent ourselves from applying reason to questions beyond experience. So you guys remember the antinomies, the nonsense that comes up with when we try to apply our intuitive understanding of space and time to things which we can't experience. Yeah, same idea. John, actually, good thing you speak German. How do I pronounce this title?
Kritik der reinen Vernunft.
Oh, man. German's a great language. All right. Kritik der reinen Vernunft.
Reine Vernunft. Like a German.
All right. All right. So next, our next lecture will be a German class. All right. So let's start. So as always, I'll read the English directly, translate it into simple English, comment on it if I have any comments, and then John will translate. So, what do we use negative judgments for? So, all propositions, indeed, may be logically expressed in a negative form, but in relation to the content of our cognition, the peculiar province of negative judgments is solely to prevent error. For this reason, too, negative propositions, which are framed for the purpose of correcting false cognitions where error is absolutely impossible, undoubtedly true, but inane and senseless. That is, they are in reality purposeless, and for this reason often very ridiculous, such as the proposition of the schoolman that Alexander could not have subdued any countries without an army. So, in simple English, negative judgments like this could not have happened, like Alexander could not have conquered a country without an army. You remember Alexander the Great here. So they're useful only to prevent error, but that's pretty much it. If there's no error to be prevented, you're wasting your time. So, yeah, John, quick translation.
所以康德在这边讨论了，就是所谓否定命题的应用。对于康德来说，否定命题的唯一的任务就是纠正一些错误。但是如果我们在进行一些模态的，或者说在进行一些虚拟的否定的时候，它其实并没有提供更多新鲜的正确的信息。所以对于康德来说，这样的否定命题就排除在研究之外。
All right. So, we know negative judgments are pointless when there's no error, but they are sometimes useful. But where the limits of our possible cognition are very much contracted, the attraction to new fields of knowledge great, the illusions to which the mind is subject to the most deceptive character, the evil consequences of error of no inconsiderable magnitude, the negative element in knowledge, which is useful only to guard us against error, far more importance than that much of that positive instruction, which makes additions to the sum of our knowledge. Or in simple English, So negative judgments are useful if we're about to make an error. In fact, if we're about to make an error, they're more useful than positive knowledge or positive judgment, which adds to knowledge, because it's more important to guard against error than it is to add to our knowledge. All right, John?
其实就是重复刚才的情况，对，就是negative 就是否定的命题，只是在防止错误，但是康德觉得应该更多的把我们的关注留在肯定的命题上。
All right, cool. So when should we be on guard against making errors? Because remember, negative judgments, they're useful when we might be about to make an error. So when should we be on guard? Well, reason, when employed in the field of experience, does not stand in need of criticism because its principles are subjected to the continual test of empirical observations. Nor is criticism requisite in the sphere of mathematics, where the conceptions of reason must always be presented in concreto and pure intuition. Baseless or arbitrary assertions are discovered without difficulty. Where reason is not held in a plain track by the influence of empirical or of pure intuition, that is, when it is employed in the transcendental sphere of pure conceptions, stands in great need of discipline, to restrain its propensity to overstep the limits of possible experience, to keep it from wandering into error. So we should be on guard when we're doing stuff outside of either experience or mathematics. And presumably when he's talking about mathematics, he means this sort of a priori mathematics, things which you'll do without needing any experience. So when it is easy to make an error is with complex synthetic ideas, right? Where you're not either purely in the realm of experience or purely in the realm of intuition. It's much easier to make an error, and we have to be very careful of our reasoning. So one example, or some examples of this might be either economic theories or historical theories. They're not entirely empirical, and they aren't entirely intuition based. If you make a judgment about the economy, it's not entirely based on experience, and it's not entirely based on intuition like mathematics. And it's sort of, Kant seems right here because no one can argue, like, no one has worse arguments than economics professors. They're always at each other's throats, and none of them can ever admit that anyone has a good idea. So Kant seems to be onto something here.
所以康德注意到，我们世界上的知识，假如说是太惊艳的，说你现在看到一坨黑色的东西，那就是黑色的东西，你没有什么好批判的。或者说你这时候完全在用你的纯理性工作，比如说你在进行一些数学的思考，那因为它太理性了，你也没什么好批判的，因为它不可能出错。假如说你做对了的话，那只有在这样的情况，就是你的理性和经验同时参与到这个工作里面来。比如说在很多经验学科的领域，比如说经济学的领域，或者说甚至即便是你看到一个简单的现象，你试图在得出什么样的归纳的时候，这个时候我们才需要所谓的哲学批判，就是纯粹理性的批判。
All right, I think this is pretty clear so far. Any questions? No. 清楚了吗? All right. Good. All right. By the way, Kant is a little too confident about empirical observations because, you know, he is living in an era where science is sort of being radicalized and revolutionized, and all these things. So reason has sort of led people astray in terms of empiricism, but I suppose that's outside Kant's well, outside what he really cares about. So let's, now that we have an idea of when reason can lead us astray, let's talk about why math isn't something that we should be worried about in terms of reason leading us into error. So the reason why mathematical cognition can relate only to quantity is found in its form alone. For it is the conception quantities only that is capable of being constructed, that is presented a priori intuition, while qualities cannot be given other than as an empirical intuition. So Kant says math is different from philosophy. Math has to do with quantities, and quantities are always a priori. Philosophy has to do with qualities, and quality is always empirical. This is a pretty interesting idea. It reminds me a lot of Hume's shades of blue. You remember Hume said, you know, they always come straight from the real world, except with rare exception. So generally speaking, like every quality here, all these shades of blue, Hume said we always get them straight from the real world, right? We've always, it's when we've actually experienced this shade of blue that we understand what blue is. This is sort of a very, very strict definition of math. Math is only about quantities, which you can understand a priori. I don't know if I can agree with that, but it's an interesting idea. John?
Yeah. So, 所以还是做上一个问题的注脚，就是康德认为数学的逻辑和所谓的批判哲学的逻辑是很不一样的，因为数学呢只依赖于量，然后呢这个量呢它就是不需要任何经验，它只需要在直觉中被知觉到就行了。就是简单说，你可以通过想象力来完成，你不需要纸张，你不需要眼睛，你也可以完成一切数学的任务。所以呢，它和经验性的知识，这些经验性的知识才真正需要哲学的批判，数学知识完全不是这样的。
Right. So now things get a little more difficult. So our next question is, why is math a priori? So why is it intuitive? And he says, well, because it always relates back to space and time, which are quantitative a priori intuitions. So the only a priori intuition is that of the pure form of phenomena, space and time. Conception of space and time as quanta may be presented a priori in intuition, is constructed either alone with their quality, figure, or as pure quantity, mere synthesis of the homogeneous by means of number. Matter of phenomena by which things are given in space and time can be presented only in perception, a posteriori. The only conception which represents a priori this empirical content of phenomena is the conception of thing in general. The a priori synthetical cognition of this conception give us nothing more than the rule for the synthesis of that which may be contained corresponding a posteriori perception. It's utterly inadequate to present an a priori intuition of the real object, which must necessarily be empirical. So, part of the reason why reading German philosophers is always unpleasant is like they really, not only do they see no need to simplify their language, they very much try to make it difficult to understand what they're saying. And Kant's not even a particularly bad example. I mean, if you compare this to Hume, for instance, it's really like night and day. Hume is so easy to understand, and he's easy to read even a couple hundred years later. You know, Kant is just, So anyways, this is a really complicated way of saying real world objects can only really be understood empirically. You can understand the idea of a form a priori. You can have like you might be able to have like an idea of a general category a priori, but you're not going to be able to understand any specific thing itself without experiencing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So,所以康德在这里说，就是他继续在解释为什么数学是鲜艳的。对于康德来说，就是数学和纯粹的直觉形式、时间和空间是有关的。我们刚才说到，就是对于康德来说，数学就分为几何和数学，或者说纯数学两个方面。当然，几何是和空间形式连在一起的，数学是和某种意义上是和时间形式连在一起的。那对于康德来说呢，他们仅仅需要这种先天形式的构建或者先天形式的帮助，然后你就能理解数字，你就能理解长度，你就能理解这样子的这些量啊和物理形状之间的关系。那你其实不需要任何后天的，也就是经验的帮助来做到这一切的东西。然后呢，他这边提到了，他说我们在这边依赖的仅仅是那些 rule 或者 synthesis， 就是说我们在这边很重要的记下这个关于中和的规则，这是康德的一个黑话。我们刚才也在抱怨德国的哲学家写作总是这样子，就是这个综合的规则，在于康德来说呢，就是很重要的。我们刚才提到的一切的先天综合的努力。我知道大家不清楚，但是大家可以把这个问题继续往后推，然后等着后面一起提出。
Alright. So you guys with us? Everyone okay? Keep going. All right. Onwards and upwards. All right. So how do we further understand things? So we come up with our initial intuition about them, or we come up with our initial experience of them. What does it really mean to form this synthetic understanding of something? So the former, a priori cognition, is rational mathematical cognition by means of the construction of the conception. The latter, a posteriori cognition, is purely empirical cognition. It does not possess the attributes of necessity and universality. Thus I analyze the conception I have of gold, but I gain no new information from this analysis. I merely enumerate the different properties which I had connected with the notion indicated by the word. My knowledge has gained in logical clearness and arrangement, but no addition has been made to it. But if I take the matter which is indicated by this name and submit it to the examination of my senses, I am enabled to form several synthetical, although still empirical, propositions. The mathematical conception of a triangle I should construct, that is, present a priori an intuition, this way attain to rational synthetical cognition. When the transcendental conception of reality or substance or power is presented to my mind, find that it does not relate to or indicate either an empirical or pure intuition, but that it indicates merely the synthesis of empirical intuitions, which cannot, of course, be given a priori. Whew. All right, so Kant is saying here, when you think about gold, you don't gain any new information. You can organize your thoughts about gold, but you're not learning anything new. If you look at gold and if you pick up gold and you feel it and smell it, you will gain new information. However, a triangle is different. When you think of a triangle, you can gain new information if you think really hard about a triangle and progress through geometrical arguments. So meanwhile, reality or something else abstract or substance, when you think of that, really you're just putting together your thoughts about real world objects. So about gold and apples and dogs and whatever else. You're not gaining new information by thinking about reality. You're just organizing the information that you already have. All right.
所以康德在这里，对他的综合命题的2种不同的综合命题，就是所谓的后天综合命题和先天综合命题。他举出了例子，这分别是我们在对世界感知的这样子一个例子。比如说，对于我们来说 ，OK， 金子是还颜色的，我们已经知道了这些事情。那还颜色的已经包含在了金子的概念中。那金子是还颜色的，这是一个分析命题。我们怎么去获得更多的信息呢？我们只好把一个金子拿过来。我突然间觉得，哇，这个金子原来拿着手里这么凉，这么重，这是我们对它的新鲜的感知。那这种感知是经验带给我们的，就是所谓的后天综合命题。而先天综合命题或者先天综合的知识呢，那只能是因为它是非经验的。我们只能说，比如说在几何的领域，我们做一些几何题，我们突然间发现三角形的3个上边的垂线会交于同一点，我发现哦，这也是一个某种意义上一些新的命题。那在这个意义上，我们做了一些先天综合的阐释，或者说阐释产生了一些先天综合的命题，它是非经验的，它不是后天的，但它是综合的。
Right. So you might think, well, why don't I just apply the rigors of math to philosophy? Like, why can't I just think about reality or substance or power with the same amount of rigor that I thought about my triangle? Well, Kant's answer is as follows. The evidence of mathematics rests upon definitions, axioms, and demonstrations. Shall be satisfied with showing that none of these forms can be employed or imitated in philosophy in the sense in which they are understood by mathematicians, that the geometrician, if he employs his method in philosophy, will succeed only in building card castles, while the employment of the philosophical method in mathematics can result in nothing but mere verbiage. So Kant says if a mathematician comes to philosophy, he's going to build a card castle. And this is a card castle, and the thing about a card castle is it's not stable, right? It gets knocked over by the slightest breeze. And then he says if a philosopher tries to come to mathematics, he's just going to end up with a bunch of words. So as a funny sort of note, Bertrand Russell, same Russell we've been talking about, he tried this exact project. Bringing the philosophical method to mathematics, and he and his mentor Alfred Whitehead, that was sort of their life's work. It ultimately failed, even though it was in great effort, because Kurt Gödel proved you can't prove mathematics within itself, and more broadly speaking, you can't prove any system within itself. If you guys are interested in more of this, look up the Principia Mathematica.
所以罗素又是在非常坚决的把康德赶出数学的领域，因为康德试图的解释在数学的领域先天综合命题是何以可能，而对于罗素来说，这里根本就不存在综合的问题，数学无非就是定义、推导、原理，然后一切的一切都仅仅是在一个系统内自洽的前后的毫无阻力的流动，它并不是一个在康德意义上就是能够产生新鲜、产生综合命题的一个地方，所以这是罗素和康德非常致命的分歧。
All right. So let's take a closer look at exactly why you can't use math's definitions in philosophy. Why mathematicians can't come into philosophy. So a definition is, as the term itself indicates, the representation upon primary grounds, the complete conception of a thing within its own limits. Accordingly, an empirical conception cannot be defined. It can only be explained. Whereas there are in such a conception only a certain number of marks or signs which denote a certain class of sensuous objects, can never be sure that we do not cogitate under the word which indicates the same object, one time a greater, at another time a smaller number of signs. Thus one person may cogitate in his conception of gold, in addition to its properties of weight, color, malleability, that of resisting rust, while another person may be ignorant of this quality. So the essential reason why you can't bring math definitions into philosophy is if you try to define a real world object like gold the same way you define a triangle, you're going to try to bound it. You're going to try to describe all of it. But unfortunately, you can't do that with a real world object. You can do that with a triangle, but you can't describe everything about a real world object. So one person can define gold as it weighs this much, it looks like this, it's this, malleable, you can bend it this much. Another person might not realize this. They're both still defining gold. So it's not the same thing as math. So let's talk about the relationship of a definition to the real world. At the same time, I cannot say that by such a definition, I have defined a real object. The conception is based upon empirical conditions. If, for example, I have a conception of a clock for a ship, this arbitrary conception does not have the existence or even of the possibility of the object. So just because you've come up with this idea in your mind of this very strict definition of your mind of an object, it doesn't mean the object exists. It doesn't mean the object is even possible. And it's interesting, he uses a clock for a ship here, which those of you who know much about history of navigation should realize it's because the great project of longitude was what was going on here. So one of the great engineering challenges of Kant's day was building a clock that could be used on a ship. All right. Yeah, John.
我觉得这里还是比较清晰的，就是他解释了一下为什么在数学的，就是正如哲学的方法可能在数学里面是牛刀小试，那数学的方法有时候在哲学的领域，尤其是先天综合的经验命题的领域是牛刀小试呢？它比如说我们在感知，我们在重新做一些几何题的时候呢，我们可以完全只调用先天的时空的形式来进行我们的几何演算或者数学演算。但是我们如果要想象一个，比如说关于金块的故事，或者关于杯子的故事，那我们得把金块画上颜色，我们得帮它想象上重量，而这一切的一切都牵涉到诸如重量、颜色、它的长度这样子的概念，而这些概念呢，它是非常严实的和经验绑定在一起，所以说数学的概念，有时候呢，在经验的领域它并不够用，然后并且呢，概念本身呢，它和现实世界差别也相当的远。我们知道，就是有时候概念并不指向一个真实的存在，就是康德做的一个小小的准备。
Right. So, for these reasons, philosophy must not imitate math with its definitions from which it argues. So you can't start off with the definition and then argue like you do in math. So we must not imitate in philosophy the mathematical usage of commencing with definitions, except by way of hypothesis or experiment. Whereas all so-called philosophical definitions are merely analysis given conceptions, these conceptions, although only in a confused form, must precede the analysis. The incomplete exposition must precede the complete, that we may be able to draw certain inferences from the characteristics which an incomplete analysis has enabled us to discover, before we attain to the complete exposition of or definition of the conception. In one word, a full and clear definition ought in philosophy rather to form the conclusion than the commencement of our labors. So, in simple English, if you're only defining it in your mind, it doesn't make sense to start off your thought process by defining it in philosophy. If you're hoping to say something about the real world or how the world actually exists. The definition is the end of your thought. It's not the beginning of it. And this is very different from mathematics, in which you start with the definition and then argue from that.
其实这里或多或少是一个文体上的考虑，并不是哲学上的考虑。就是康德认为我们在方法论上，除了假设和实验，因为这牵涉到归纳法，数学呢和哲学呢是不需要归纳法的。在这一点上呢，它当然不需要，但是在其他的文体上，其实康德是很向数学上靠近的。我们看他的第一批判，也就是纯粹理性批判的时候，我们就能很容易的注意到，就是康德其实在模仿牛顿的数学原理在写作，然后在这种方法上，康德是乐于学习数学所使用的那种推导、那种判断、那种公理系统等等的非常数学的方法。
Alright, gonna skip the next one, and then lastly, let's talk about how we actually prove things in math versus how we prove things in philosophy. Only an apodeictic proof based upon intuition can be termed a demonstration. Experience teaches us what is, but it cannot convince us that it might have been otherwise. Hence, a proof upon empirical grounds cannot be apodeic. A priori conceptions in discursive cognition can never produce intuitive certainty or evidence, however certain the judgment they present may be. Mathematics alone, therefore, contains demonstrations, because it does not deduce its cognition from conceptions and the construction of conceptions. It is from intuition, which can be given a priori in accordance with conceptions. So you can prove this simple mathematical equation, minus 2x plus 2 equals x over 2 plus 1 over 2. Subtract, put these together, end up with x equals 3 over 5. You can prove this because this is embodied in the way we've built math. And this end result, x equals 3 over 5, is embodied in this first equation, even if you only understand it once you go through this whole process. You can't understand, you can't prove, on the other hand, that the sun made this rock warm, because I can imagine the sun making a rock cold. I can imagine the sun beating down on a rock for a while and I touch it and it's cold. The proof of sun making a rock warm is based on our idea of causation. It's not present in the idea of suns and rocks in the same way that x equals 3 over 5 was present in this initial equation.
同样的，康德在这里提出了就是数学比起经验知识的优越性，就是数学虽然我们前面已经提过了，它是牵涉到时空形式的一个东西，但是呢因为它不牵涉到经验，所以它的证明我们总觉得是可靠的。相反的，在经验的世界，一旦牵涉到经验，我们就不能证明一个东西是对的。比如说，我们从来不能有效的证明太阳，比如说能把石头晒热，这只是我们无穷的观测的一个结果。从无穷的观测太阳把石头晒热这样一个结果中，我们归纳出太阳似乎能把石头晒热这样一个结果，并非是证明。对于康德来说，这是可以证明的科学，也就是只牵涉时空形式而不牵涉经验的数学和不能证明的学科，这就是牵涉到经验学科之间的非常重要的差别。
Alright, so that concludes our excerpt from the Critique of Pure Reason. Kant argued reason with reason using long paragraphs and detailed examples to prove his points. A combination of sort of intuitive understanding and deduction also using very complicated language. So that's how Kant argued. And so as a conclusion, we finished with Kant. So conclusion, is Immanuel Kant the most important modern philosopher? Maybe. He's certainly a very influential one, and his formal recognition that we come pre-built with intuitions is a powerful one, even if it had been foreshadowed by Bacon, among others. So you guys remember, Idols of the Cave. Bacon talks about this, but Kant, the formal way he goes about it is very influential. And we also see in Kant a way of rescuing Aristotle's attempt to connect the real world to philosophy, which Hume had destroyed, as well as a way of convincing ourselves that there are truths beyond just inferences from experience. So that's another reason why Kant is important here. So what's most interesting for our purposes will be this bit at the end, where Kant discusses what his thinking means for philosophical arguments and how we prove things in philosophy. What is the future of philosophical arguments? Let's find out next time when we talk about Wittgenstein. All right, another German. So that is it for class today. Finished in a reasonable amount of time. It's 11:02. So I think it's pretty good work, John. All right. Stick around for a couple minutes, answer any questions. Thank you for being patient and working hard to understand this. I know Kant is tough one to understand. So thanks, guys. So John, you studied Kant, right?
Yeah, somehow. Still very unclear about him. It is not consistent, actually. I think his philosophies and even the first version and second version are pretty.
You would know better than me. Yeah.
No, nothing about it.
You know about.
That's the reason I have given up Kant at the end.
You know about Kant in the Socratic sense. You know that you know nothing about Kant.
Thank you. I take it as a compliment.
Good enough. All right. So if there are no questions, then you guys have homework. It's up on Reddit. Also on QQ, you also have Hume homework, which you should do. You should have done. That's already on Reddit. And I will see you guys on Wednesday, Wednesday morning for me, Wednesday evening for you. And we'll talk about Wittgenstein. I'm looking forward to it. Always a pleasure. Bye-bye.